June 13, 1980. Could you please indicate if you're aware of who these 39 persons are by name, or any of them?
Some of them were WPA activists from the West Coast, Demerara, including, I think, Ivan Sukram, Adwan, I can't remember the names, but several of them were WPA members from the West Coast of Demerara. But I can't remember all of the other names, no. I would have to check my records. So.
But more in particular, on suspicion of political action hostile to the rulers, can you enlighten us as to what sort of action might have been hostile to the rulers?
Again, I can't elaborate on that. The environment around that period is very, very tense, and the descriptions of what is hostile didn't emanate from us. It came from the other side, so to speak. So I wouldn't be able to speak confidently on what their interpretation of hostile was.
But is this the language of a particular charge, or this is your understanding of what they were held for?
This is not my quote. This is a quote directly from Decline. I didn't write this.
But as a member of the WPA, and the Decline being a publication of the WPA, what did you understand that the WPA understood to be political action hostile to the rulers?
Well, it would have been the fact that it's just still in the era of the Civil Rebellion, and there were a lot of attempts to expand the party in various regions of the country, including the West Coast, the East Coast, Berbice, and elsewhere. And given the trajectory of the development of the worries of the state about the party's expansion, I would imagine that this refers to that hostile action, because, as again, it's their configuration. I could only assume it meant that the party's expansion was becoming at a rate which is dangerous to the ruling party at the time, and hence the ascription of hostile. But there are other references to hostile behavior prior to this particular period, the period under which those incidents I referred to, the one on the West Coast and the one in Camberville, state media would often say hostile opposition forces. So it's a general term used at that time.
What does he mean by state media? I'm very sorry.
Yeah, the state media would include the Guyana Broadcasting Corporation, Radio Demerara, the Guyana Chronicle. I can't recall any other national newspaper at the time, but yes, the state media. At that time, paramount the party was picking up, and most of the state media was controlled or influenced by the ruling party at the time.
So you listed the Guyana Chronicle, the Guyana Radio...
Guyana Broadcasting Corporation.
Sean, you listed three things.
And Radio Demerara, which is
Thank
another radio.
Thank you.
We're going to rely on you to see if you can what legislation permitted these seeming violations. Though there was legislation that gave considerable latitude, for example, as I understand, I think Mr. Williams had made reference to it.
National Security Act.
National Security
Act.
Yes.
I can address
whereby
that.
You could have been held for upwards of a week or even more.
I can address that, Mr. Chairman.
I don't think we have it among our papers. We do. Some of mine have left in Barbados. I noticed you walk with a truckload. Perhaps that's wise. National Security Act.
We do.
We don't have it amongst any papers here that you haven't given it to us.
As commissioners, we will give it.
We will be grateful
For copies?
also for copies.
We can make arrangements. We can make arrangements for those copies for council. Dr. Westmaas, in 1980, you traversed several persons being arrested and their homes being searched under the National Security Act.
Yes.
For example, if you look at June 7th, 1980, party of 7 police searched the home of Ms. Olga Bourne. Under the National Security Act, Ms. Bourne taken to CID headquarters. She was held for 3 hours. You're familiar with the National Security Act at that time?
I was familiar in general with the National Security Act. The provisions are in the legal frame of reference which outside of my competence.
But your understanding
Yeah.
of the use of this act between 1978 to 79, what was your understanding of the use of the act?
My understanding it provided powers for search and seizure and other processes of preventing the opposition from doing certain things.
And who had these powers?
The state, as represented by the government of Guyana at the time.
Were you ever subjected to any of these searches under the National Security Act?
Yes, I was.
What was subjected to searches?
Pardon?
What was suggested? Your home?
Oh, my
your
home, yes.
car?
My home was searched. I can't recall, again, I'm sorry, but I can't recall the exact date and time, but a party of 5 police entered my home and searched my room, that of my father, and the rest of the house. So, yes. They didn't stay long. They particularly focused on my room, and then they left.
Did they indicate what they were searching for when they came to your home?
I think at the time it was arms and ammunition.
Did they find anything from
No.
the search?
Did they produce any document, any warrant, any order from any minister, anything at all?
No, those days, I must be honest, I don't remember, but I do think that they would have shown a badge saying that they're police detectives, but generally speaking, they had the right to come in, and even at that, I mean, I was stopped several times, and there's no, you just assume they're the state police, and you can't do anything because they have a gun in their waist and stuff like that.
So your recollection is that no document was shown to you and it was not usual in those times. Is that what you're saying?
No, my recollection is that I'm fuzzy, my memory is fuzzy about whether or not a document was produced to indicate that they want to search the home under the National Security Act. I can't remember.
Thank
Can't
you.
recall.
Dr. Westmaas, I would wish at this point in time to move off of Appendix 3 and take you back to your written statement
Yes.
at page 7. Page 7 of his written statement. You have a paragraph which has the heading WPA membership role and the Gregory Smith text.
Yes.
You care to give an explanation as to what role you believe Gregory Smith may have had in relation to being a member of the WPA?
He's not a member of the WPA.
And why are you saying he was not a member of the WPA?
Both in the context of the membership role of the WPA, and secondly in terms of the subsequent assessments of his role with Dr. Walter Rodney and others, that many of the members did not know of his existence.
Did you know of his existence?
Never, no.
But having read his text, did
Even
you
before I read his text, I knew of his existence because by June 30th or thereafter, Catholic Standard and other reports began to identify a person called Gregory Smith. But yes, it was confirmed by the publication of his book. I read it in the context of his being the author of that particular text which I referred to.
You stated in the very paragraph with this heading that the first is the statement on page 23 where Smith states, Brother Yarden gave me a form to fill. The form was about 6 inches by 4 inches and I filled in my name, date, birth, address, and occupation. A membership secretary of the party at the time,
At one time,
as a de facto archivist, I can categorically confirm, based on my perusal of our WPA records, that there are no Gregory Smiths on the membership roll of the party at any point in time.
That is correct.
Now, having read Gregory Smith's book and him claiming to have filled up a membership form, you then made checks of the membership roll of the WPA?
Yes.
and just explain for us what the membership role of the WPA is.
Well, it's an assembly of documents over time in which we process membership and name them in various districts of the country. So it's a general term referring to the entire WPA membership over a period of time. The point in which I became membership secretary was not the period in which Smith's claim occurred, but subsequently I had access to the records as membership secretary. And in all of my perusal, there's no such name as Gregory Smith.
Now, you in this paragraph dealt with you can clarify or contradict based on your own knowledge positions in the party over time.
Yeah.
At least two facts that were stated in Gregory Smith's book. What is the second aspect you dealt with in the second paragraph under that heading?
The names of the membership?
Correct.
Yeah. Of the names mentioned by Gregory Smith's book and Anne Wagner's book, which lists a few names, including Brother Morris, Brother Winston, and Yarden, and others. And I have no recollection of those names in the membership roll.
You made a physical check of the roll?
Yes, I did.
And you did not find those names?
No.
So this is another aspect which you are contradicting what is stated in Gregory Smith's book,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Your statement moves on to deal with a section where you headed "Why the Assassination?" and it starts again on page 7. And you proceeded to give your view. Is that so, Mr.?
Yes.
Correct. Could you now at this time just give us some details as to why, in your view, there was a wide assembly of origins and contexts that led to the challenge posed by the WPA, especially the period 1978-1980?
Well, this section of the parts of this statement to the Commission was culled from my own research in preparation for a book on the WPA history between 1974 and 1985. And as a result of that, sections of extracts of this information was placed or summarized for the convenience of my statement to the Commission.
You can use your statement as a guide and just proceed to tell us, according to your own interpretation,
Right.
what
So,
would have led to the assassination.
Yeah, in my research on the origins and activity of the WPA over time, or the challenge it posed, I proposed several things, or several challenges or origins that made the WPA a threat to the state at the time. And one of them, of course, is the actions of the WPA in terms of its multiracial challenge, not only to the People's National Congress, but also to the People's Progressive Party at that time. But the principal opponent was the People's National Congress. And what I mean by multiracial challenge is that the WPA, from its outset, organized deliberately, morally, politically, and socially to activate a resurgence, I should say, of racial unity in Guyana, which was lost for at least a generation. And this work started prior to the arrival of Dr. Walter Rodney. It was actually begun by a consequence of organizations which made up the WPA subsequently, including the Indian Political Revolutionary Associates, headed by Moses Bagwan, attorney at law, who now resides in the United States. Secondly, ASCRIA, African Society for Cultural and Independent Relations with Independent Africa, which was one of the co-elders of which was Brother U.C. Guyana, and other organizations, including the Working People's Vanguard Party. These organizations began to work with each other prior to 1974, when the WPA occurred. And principally, the two architects, I should say, are Moses Bagwan and U.C. Guyana, who met secretly to try to develop a relationship across racial lines, and subsequently to develop an organization which could address the racial problem in Guyana. So my point about multiracial challenge is when the WPA arose, it consecrated and developed and expanded those initial conceptions of Moses Bagwan and U.C. Guyana in their initial forays into the theme, and it became more principally and programmatically organized to reach out to the majority of people of Indian and African descent and Amerindian descent in Guyana. And as out of that, I suggest that multiracial challenge provoked certain responses from the powers that be, not exclusively the People's National Congress, but also the People's Progressive Party.
You also spoke about a democratic challenge. You care to explain this democratic challenge?
Yeah, well, the democratic challenge was an ongoing process which not necessarily included at all times the WPA. It goes back, of course, to the 1960s, but comes into 1973 elections, which, from all intents and purposes, and from international observers and local observers, suggest it was rigged. And out of that process, a number of organizations, including then the WPA, which was formed in 1974, began to challenge the bona fides of the erosion of democratic rights in Guyana in all forms, state media, electoral, freedom of information, freedom of movement, freedom to hold public meetings, and all of those things. Of course, it was a slow development. It didn't occur at one moment. But out of that democratic challenge came public demonstrations, the coalition of forces, and the arrival of street protests. And in that context, I would suggest that the response of the state was equivalent or contiguous with that response by the broad mass of organizations and people from 1973 onwards. And of course, it included very principally the referendum boycott and referendum struggles, which I mentioned earlier. The Committee in Defense of Democracy arose. But out of that democratic challenge came the consequences of the broad challenge, among other challenges.
Dr. Westmaas, this commission has 5 terms of reference. And term of reference 2 says this, that the commission is mandated to inquire into the cause of the explosion in which Dr. Rodney died, whether it was an act of terrorism, and if so, who were the perpetrators. Dr. Westmaas, in your opinion, who do you believe were the perpetrators of the explosion causing the death of Dr. Rodney?
Based on all of the information over time that was gathered by the WPA and other interested parties, and by evidence from various sources, I would suggest that the regime in power at the time was responsible.
Did you view this as an act of terrorism? Or would you classify it as an act of terrorism? And if so, why?
Well, any act that results in the dismemberment or disfigurement of an individual by virtue of a device or by gunshot or whatever device is an act of terror once it's not, quote-unquote, legally executed by the state, meaning that usually if your body is brought before the court and sentenced for crimes they committed, then even if it's illegal in the moral sense, it's at least legal in the political and social and the constitutional sense. In the case of Dr. Rodney's demise, no such, he was not afforded any criminal proceedings to clear his name or defend himself, but was killed by the process of a device.
Dr. Westmaas, do you believe that between the period 1978-1980, you and other members of the WPA, including Dr. Rodney, were under surveillance?
Yes, I would indicate that by the fact that the recognition handbook, my own personal observations of activities of people of the time. I could give you one specific incident, surveillance-wise, by the head of the security service at the time, Laurie Lewis. Laurie Lewis lived in my area in Prashad Nagar, and we would pass each other, I should say. He drove I can't remember, it was a ladder, but he would live not far from me, and he drove to Ogle on the East Coast where I subsequently learned the intelligence services coordinated activities. And I was an early morning jogger and I would normally pass him on the way, and he on the way, either coming back or going. And he would usually put out his hand and greet me and say, give me the V signal. And on one occasion, at a particularly tense time, I gave him back the V signal, and he turned his car around and drove it straight up to my feet and walked me to my driveway, revving the engine. He was in the car alone, and then he watched me go into my gate, and then he watched me for a while, and then he went away. And then he drove away. The next day, he was back to his old bonhomie self and showed me the V signal, was grinning. So I would only imagine that was an act to test my mettle or something, I don't know, because we lived in the same area. Maybe he was concerned of his own security. But it was one incident which suggested to me that the state surveillance was very active, and even me as an ordinary member was subject to that surveillance.
Mr. Lewis, do you know what organization he was, Mr. Laurie Lewis, do you know what organization he was part of?
I knew he was an assistant commissioner of police, but in terms of the organization itself at Ogle, it was a very loose notion or an anecdotal notion that it was intelligence services in which he coordinated. We just heard this by rumor, but the way in which he drove up there and the way in which he organized his activities and such suggests to me some truth in that observation that Ogle, assistant commissioner, and of course surveillance and security was his forte.
Are you aware of whether the Guyana Defense Force was conducting any surveillance of yourself and or the other WPA members?
In terms of the military, I would have to say I don't know.
Are you aware of any member of the Guyana National Service engaging in surveillance of yourself and or the other members of the WPA?
Not to my knowledge in the specific sense of national service being a principal organ of that surveillance, but in general, our organs of the state were coordinated together, so in that, I would be implicit that they would be part of it, but I'm not sure.
These organs of the state that would coordinate, could you identify them?
Well, again, from an anecdotal and of course some perspective after written documents and stuff like that, you would suggest the Guyana Defense Force military intelligence, the Guyana National Service in respect of the fact that, its leadership was, former military officers, the Guyana Police Force, at least the CID under Skip Roberts, and maybe other agencies which were not named who were part of that broad, I don't know what their relationship would be, but generally speaking, they would be the coordinating officers who would deal with the intelligence. And names came up at times of who these individuals were subsequently, after the fact, not when I was active, but afterwards.
Well, you had an opportunity to ask Mr. Lewis what that was about.
No, he knew and I knew that we were, if you know Laurie Lewis, and I think witnesses before mentioned him, he represented himself, he came from the Queen's College grouping, so he knew members of the opposition. I learned later that his intelligence services began very early in the 1960s when he, again this is anecdotal, I don't have any evidence of it, but he fed intelligence to Janet Jagan at that time, and subsequently became linked to the post-colonial Guyana government and worked his way up, securing the loyalties of various governments all the way up to 1995. So he traversed a number of political organizations in Guyana, and he presented himself in as I said, in a very friendly way in certain ways. So I noticed both aspects of Laurie Lewis at that time as he lived in Prashad Nagar, the friendly aspect and the threatening aspect in that particular incident. But we worked with each other in a certain way, like, because we lived in the area, he probably knew more about me than I knew about him.
So how in the end you interpreted that act that you just referred to?
Pardon? How did I what?
Interpret the act that you referred to.
That act was, I think it was at a high point of repression. It was presumably early 1980 when WPA activists were being searched, and my interpretation of it would be that he was uncertain of my position in the WPA at that time, insofar as he considered a threat. And so he would, he would test my mettle, so to speak, to see. I presume he knew that my father was a member of the official opposition. My father worked with Dr. Jagan as a secretary to Dr. Jagan, and I was on the opposite side. So we shared a house of differences. But Laurie Lewis himself, I think, regarded as probably Prime Minister Burnham, the PPP as an official opposition which posed not the type of threat that WPA posed. And so I think Laurie Lewis's reasoning was, I have to test Westmaas's mettle in respect of his association with WPA, because we know other WPA members are being locked up for quote-unquote threats against the state. And so I think I fit into that configuration. So that moment was him testing me, or testing my mettle in relation to security. Especially, maybe his own security, because he lived in Prashad Nagar, quite close to me.
So what impression you thought you conveyed about your mettle?
Oh, well, my mettle was tested in the cane fields at La Grange. So after that, there was nothing that could scare me after that. So I wasn't scared by him at all. I walked very calmly into my gate. I looked back at him. He had a way of peering at me for a long time. He stayed there for about 5 minutes and then drove off. And the next day, he was back to normal. So I think I passed the mettle there.
You behaving like a kind of sports mega?
Pardon? Sports mega?
Very well, please go ahead.
Dr. Westmaas, at any point in time between 1978 and 1980, were you ever aware of the WPA gathering arms and ammunition?
No.
Were you ever given any arms or ammunition
No.
by any member of the executive of the WPA?
No, never.
Did you ever see any of the WPA members with arms or ammunition?
No.
Dr. Westmaas, were you aware of any plot to arrest the then Prime Minister, Mr. Burnham?
Absolutely not. At that time, I considered it inconceivable.
Did you mean by the state forces or by civilians? I'm not
By
sure
the
if you meant
WPA.
officials.
Yeah,
By
and
the
I
WPA.
understood we mean WP, and at that time, it would be inconceivable to arrest Mr. Burnham.
And why are you describing it as inconceivable?
Because we may have been in the amphitheater, as he said it, but we were the minnows in the amphitheater. We didn't have the security and the powers of the state possessed at that time. We couldn't possibly, overthrow the state in that particular period.
Were you aware what the WPA intended to achieve by their civil rebellion?
The civil rebellion did not include exclusively the WPA. The WPA was a major part of it, but the intention of the civil rebellion, as it stands, as the term stands, was a combination of forces and protests and significations in terms of documents which urged the state to produce a situation where a democratic practice was available to the mass of the population, and the wherewithal to achieve future free and fair elections, as well as democratic practices which involved media, civilian liberties, and other issues. So we were in that conception of the civil rebellion, meaning a civil rebellion against the erosion of democratic rights at that time.
And just for the record, in Appendix 5 of your statement, you made reference to 3 articles which are attached to your statement.
Yes.
One written by Mr. U.C. Guyana,
Yes.
and 2 of these articles that were written by you.
Yes.
The first one, could you please just give us an overview of that particular article which is attached to your statement?
Yeah.
But there are two, which one?
The first one, resisting orthodoxy.
No, that is not by UC Guyana. If you want me to refer to UC Guyana.
The first one written by yourself.
Oh, myself, sorry. Okay. Yeah, Resisting Orthodoxy, Notes on the Origin and Ideology of the Working People's Alliance was written by me in 2000.
You're speaking far too quickly.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Resisting Orthodoxy, Notes on the Origins and Ideology of the Working People's Alliance was written by me while I was doing my master's at Binghamton University and was subsequently published in 2004. It comprised sections of my research on the formation and legacy of the WPA, and it included most specifically the period prior to the WPA's organization and arrival from 1974 to 1979. And it discussed the component parts of the WPA that arose then, including Mao, IPRA, Indian Political Revolutionary Associates, ASPRIA, which I mentioned earlier, the WPVP, Working People's Vanguard Party, which subsequently left the alliance, and individuals, including Dr. Rupnarayan and Dai and Dr. Walter Rodney, who came into the party as individuals. So this article summarized that history and gave some indications of the WPA's philosophy and political practice over a period of time.
I see it here mentioned as published Small Acts, number 15, March 2004.
Yeah, the Small Acts is a publication emanating from the United States. I can't remember the editor's name, David Scott. Yeah, David Scott. It's a formal publication.
It still exists?
Yes, it still exists on an online format.
Well, the second one is published in Caribbean Studies.
Yeah, Caribbean Studies. Well,
for the last 40 years or more.
yes, the Caribbean Studies has been around quite a while, yes.
Yeah.
And the last article, just give us a brief overview as to what you would have focused on in that particular article.
Well, this article predates the period of, it includes the period under the first article I mentioned, but it predates it more specifically to get the seminal origins of the philosophy or the new political culture which derived from a set of circumstances in the 60s. More precisely, the formation of what is called the New World Group, which included George Beckford, an economist, Norman Girvan of Jamaica, Clive Thomas, and other, David E. Carey's, and other academics, and Tim Hector from Antigua, who were interested in developing a consciousness, a political consciousness coming out of independence, which challenged the orthodoxies of the old era, both colonial and also the Marxist project, which was tended to be very schematic in its interpretation of the Caribbean. And so the New World Group, I was analyzing it in the context of its history up to the 1970s when the WPA was formed, and the streams of that era could be noticeable in how it affected people like Clive Thomas, Walter Rodney, UC Guyana, and Dr. Rupnarayan and others in terms of their return to some of those seminal concepts and make it into more political agency. In other words, the New World ideas were now being formulated in the form of a real political action, apart from being theoretical. The second aspect has to do with the turbulence of the 1960s, of which Walter Rodney was a very significant part, because in Jamaica, there are two episodes in Jamaica where the Jamaican intelligence services had warned themselves and others that Dr. Walter Rodney posed the most significant threat of any individual in the region at the time. And this applied more specifically in 1968, when he was ejected from Jamaica after teaching, going to Montreal, when he was ejected because of his influence in Jamaica at that time. But 1968 was also seminal in the sense that many events were happening around the world, which made it a very powerful era and year powerful possibility for the future, especially the radical future. The Tet Offensive was on. Malcolm X has been, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and there are many other events around the world which was showing that, the world, even events which were counter to that tendency, including the invasion of Czechoslovakia.
Mr. Westmaas,
Yes.
or Doctor, sorry, the second person within a fortnight or so that I've heard discussing the New World Group.
Yeah.
You mentioned a dozen or more names there just now, as happened 2 weeks ago too, and no mention was made of the man who, and I was there in Mona at the time, who I regarded as the most prominent of the people at the outset, Lloyd Bess.
Oh yes, Lloyd Bess is in the book, in my article. I omitted. I mentioned a few of them. I couldn't recall, but he was the principal one. Actually, he worked with David de Carys in Guyana to publish New World publications, which was, very good. You're right. Lloyd Bess would be the most.
Just wanted to be sure that I didn't get it wrong and misperceive what was happening around me.
No. Mr. Lloyd Bess was a very, very principal and architect in the New World Group. Yes. Okay.
Dr. Westmaas, having written these articles and traversed the period, what effect, if any, did the death of Walter Rodney have on the civil rebellion and the WPA's program to have democracy change within Guyana?
Obviously, the removal of somebody of his stature stymied the movement in very significant ways. You had to operate now on the basis of his legacy, and we tried to keep his legacy alive consistently, but the man himself was not there, and it can't translate in the same way that he did. But the WPA actually grew in scope and size organizationally from 1980 than it was before. In other words, it was stronger in the mass way in 1978-1980 period, but it grew better or stronger organizationally by 1982 onwards up to 1992. The most significant year, I think, of its strength was probably in 1985 when it challenged the then Desmond Hoyt regime, and Desmond Hoyt made a statement which showed that the WPA had become very significant in the society. He made a statement which said, we must contain the WPA. It also affected the other principal opposition party, the People's Progressive Party, who felt challenged by the presence, the multiracial challenge of WPA, and other brothers and sisters of WPA can testify, Wazir Mohammed and others who worked in the Berbice area can tell you that Johnny Jagan broke down at one time and appealed to supporters of the People's Progressive Party to stop joining the WPA. So it affected both groups. And so I would say that Rodney's presence helped that. We couldn't have done it with his presence prior to this, but we developed it. But his death affected us all, definitely.
I'm not sure what the witness is saying. Is it that Dr. Walter Rodney was a stumbling block to the growth of the WPA?
No, I'm not saying that.
Or is he saying that his death ignited and
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
made
that
PRSs more active? You haven't told us how
Yeah.
it is that Dr. Walter's death led to these things.
Oh, well, it's when somebody is removed from the scene, it doesn't mean that their ideas are not present. And we, in association with when Rodney was alive and his seminal documents and his presence in the memory of people, we worked on that legacy to develop the party in more profound ways. All I was talking about in terms of it, I wasn't suggesting that we benefited in a certain way from his death, but I'm suggesting to you that his ideas, his principles, his main political documents, and the memory of those activists who worked with him, who remained in the party, allowed us to carry on his legacy and the legacy of the movement to a very high proportion after his death.
Unless I could be of further assistance, I believe these are the extent of my questions for Dr. Westmaas. Thank you.
Madam, are you going to go first?
I think we agreed amongst ourselves, Chair, that I would go. I'd be very brief.
Yes, Mr. Pilgrim.
Can you tell us, Mr. Westmaas, I hope I'm saying it, it's Westmaas, not Westmaas. Westmaas.
People say Westmaas too. It's fine.
Okay. At the time, June 1980, the court system in Guyana was fully operational, as far as you know, the courts.
Yes.
And the police force, although you may have your view of the police force, it was still fully operational.
Yes.
Now, in one of your articles, I think it is the one with the caption Project Muse, Resisting Orthodoxy, Notes on the Origins, etc.
Yes.
You make some references to CLR James.
Yes.
And I'm going to take you there. Chair, this is one of the 3 articles which were appended to the statement of the witness, and it has a caption, Project Muse, with an M on it.
Get ahead. We do have a lot of
I'm grateful
paper
to you.
before us.
And at page, I think it was originally listed in his statement as not so much as an appendix. I
Let
think
me
it just
see.
said there was a reference to 3 articles.
Let me see the front of it again
It's
because.
got a little M.
Okay.
It was the first. Well, initially, we received the statement with 3 articles attached, and this was the first of the 3. I think it's presumed to be part of, but
Well, for the purposes of the public and those who don't have the papers before them, just quote from it what we want to put to him.
certainly, Chair. On page 66 of that article, you have the article before you, sir?
No, I don't have the article. Sorry.
Someone help him with a copy of that.
If I may, Madam Commissioner,
Page
it was
66?
tendered as a part of the appendix number 5.
So appendix number 5 has 3 articles, I think I'm correct, and this is one of the 3.
Yes.
So at page 66 of that,
Yes.
towards the bottom, that last paragraph, the stalemate at the domestic level was a setting in which the WPA arose to challenge both the socialism of the 2 behemoths and their role in racial division. You see where I am?
Yes.
I'm really interested in CLR James.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay.
So
Not seeing it over there.
There seems to be some construction going on here. If I may explain, the bathroom door is locked. If it is disturbing us, could I ask for 1 minute for the contractor to get it sorted out?
no, we were just concerned. We didn't want to think anyone was breaking in.
As a public place, the bathroom door should long be open. Every now and again that happens. I don't know why, but we'll pause just for a minute or 2.
Great. Halftime.
Thank you.
However, West Indies are struggling. John DePaul is out. It is 86 for 4, and we chase 308.
There is hope. Bravo is batting.
What is the fate of Bradford?
Bradford, I'm afraid, so he went early. I think he got about 20 odd. Gale got about 11. So we are not doing as we would like. But my learned friend to my right takes hope in the fact that his Trinidadian colleague Bravo is still at the crease.
There's the
I think Bravo is out too, so you better.
possibility of rain.
I think in the end, should be the blue base might rescue you. The god of rain, man.
Bravo and Ramden holding fast. Bravo is at 29, Ramden on 16.
No fear, Chairman.
Trinidad and Tobago is
Trinidadians will bring
here.
us over.
I'm told that the door is now open, and to that extent, we are free to proceed.
Grateful. That we were
Yes.
looking at another famous Trinidadian, CLR James.
Yes.
The second sentence there begins, the WPA's emergence cannot be detached from regional and worldwide developments, including the global upsurge in 1968, the Caribbean Black Power movement, the emergence of the New World Group of the 60s, the February 1970 revolt in Trinidad, the overarching influence of the work of CLR James, and the general ferment and rethinking evident in academia.
Yes.
I just want to set that background, come a little further down, and really go over leaf to page 67. The impact of CLR James was likewise evident in the framing of Rodney's philosophy of the self-emancipation of the working people, a slogan later adopted by the WPA. Rodney claimed that James provided him with the methodological tools to grapple with the Marxist ideology, and that he, James, stood out as, quote, the person who seemed to be making more sense than others.
Yeah.
And these are your words, your assessment.
Yeah.
Would you be aware at all if Walter Rodney actually had contact with CLR James?
Yes, very significant contact. I think he saw James as a kind of a mentor. I can't recall the exact times and dates, but I knew that he frequently met with James and also read his publication.
You appreciate that you may have a person as a mentor but not necessarily have contact, but you're saying that you're aware that they had actual contact.
Yes, and we've received evidence, and I think we've come across it too in documents presented, that he frequently visited James at his house in London.
Yeah.
That's my understanding as well, Chair. I just wanted this witness to offer some corroborative support, because in light of EK 9, which we had from the witness, Mr. Guyana, there was a quotation from CLR James, which is at page 141 of EK 9, in which CLR James purports or quotes himself as saying that he told Walter Rodney, be aware of assassination because Burnham will kill you. You are someone who could represent the people against him. So this is consistent with your knowledge that the two of them had a personal relationship.
Yes.
Grateful. In your article, Caribbean Studies,
Yeah.
at or about page 116, this one, Chair, is also one of the articles referred to in Appendix 5, one of the three. This one is Caribbean Studies, and this is the cover. I would perhaps have to ask Mr. Westmaas if he could tell us, other than the fact that there appears to be a naked lady sitting on the edge of
A cover of a journal which has a specific feature might represent the artwork of the principal documents, because my article was just one of several in that particular journal.
So you don't
So
know.
I don't have any role in the cover art, so to speak.
At page 116 of that article. You have a copy with you.
Yes.
At what would be the second paragraph, it was in this context that Walter Rodney made his reappearance on the Guyana stage. Lewis, 1998, recounted the historian's application to the University of Guyana for a place as Director of Caribbean Studies from Tanzania. Lewis cites the Assistant Registrar's 1972 response to Rodney in the famously terse memo. No suitable vacancy in the Department of History for someone with your qualifications and experience. Your letter is on file, and as soon as there is a suitable opening, it will be given due consideration. The post Director of Caribbean Studies was offered to another candidate. I'm just wondering if you had any specific knowledge through your research and so on, who in fact was this other candidate and any of those circumstances, if you have any information about that other party who got that post.
There was talk of one Mohammed Insanali, but I'm not sure if it refers to Mohammed Insanali, because he was also denied posts at the University of Guyana as an academic. But I'm not sure if this refers to him. I can't reconfigure the timeline. I forgot the timeline.
But Mr. Pilgrim, if I'm hearing you correctly, this is the first time that I am learning that Rodney had applied for a position other than that of Professor of History.
I understand he applied for, well, 2 different positions. This is picked up here in this reference as well.
But you had heard of that before?
Only in the statement that we got earlier today. I think there's a reference to both. A little further down the page, Mr. Westmaas,
Yes.
the PNC regime most likely felt unease at Rodney's track record as a militant and his banning from Jamaica in '68.
Yes.
A position of professor in the history department of the university was on offer by 1974, and the department had voted for Rodney's enrollment. What did you understand the department's role to be?
Well, at that time, a department in the University of Guyana had some semblance of independence as an academic institution, and I assumed that they would had voted in favor of Rodney's retention. Who would refuse, for example, somebody who wrote How Europe Underdeveloped Africa and the History of the Upper Guinea Coast and was so world-renowned? So my conception of this would be that it would be their independence was at work here, but the Board of Governors thought otherwise.
And as you understand, the Board of Governors had the final say.
Well, I can't speak to the technicalities of the university system at that time, but generally speaking, yes.
Then, towards the end of that page, Rodney applied but was again turned down. As Lewis notes, quote, "The Burnhamites on the Board of Governors of the University of Guyana had overturned the decision of the Academic Appointment Committee. Rodney's own version differs with that of the Academic Council." And then the quotation, and this is a quotation directly from Walter Rodney, as I understand it.
Yeah, so if you look at number 41, it would probably give you the citation at the back of where that quote was actually taken from. It's taken from a statement by Dr. Walter Rodney, 18th of September 1974, the document which I referred to earlier.
And you would have written this article when?
This article would have been written, well, usually you send an article prior to its publication. So this was published in 2009. I would have sent this in 2008 or thereabouts.
And the quotation from Dr. Rodney, you'll agree with me, is consistent with what appeared to be his desire to give something back to the Guyanese people.
Oh yes, very much so.
And lastly, from your understanding of what Walter Rodney was involved in whilst he was in Guyana in that period after his return, do you know how he managed to survive at all? In terms of work.
Yeah, well, being a professor, even at that time, I think he had books, maybe royalties from books published abroad. I wouldn't know his personal life, but friends would support him. But I would imagine that his role as a professor on lecture circuits, he would receive fees, would enable him to continue.
And
but he drove a small Mini, so he was obviously not on the high end of the lecturer, survival in that time.
But you were also aware, I think you made a reference just now, the fact that he had actually done some appointments outside of Guyana, even in this period.
Yes, I heard, yes. He went to Germany and a few other places, right?
I ask, quite frankly, because I understand that curiously on his death certificate he's described as unemployed, and I just wondered if you were aware that he did in fact do work.
Well, he did work, as one of my colleagues and I would suggest, he worked everywhere. When he was on the Stelling, he wrote. When he was in the office, I saw him many times in the WP office with his shirt off, writing some history or other. When we were behind on the septic tank, he was speaking about history. Any engagement with Walter Rodney involved academia and the political struggle. So I would imagine they were correct that he was actually, he may not be gainfully employed, but he was actively working in terms of his scholarship.
Do you think it would be fair to describe him as a historian?
Oh yes, certainly, most certainly.
And an academic?
Yes, certainly.
I'm grateful. That's me, Chair.
Dr. Westmaas.
Morning. Afternoon.
Good afternoon indeed.
Mr. Ram,
Mr. Westmaas, are you planning to write any full-length book on historical events
Yes,
in Guyana?
two.
Two. And what are these?
My manuscript, which I got the PhD for in terms of the historical press in Guyana, British Guyana and Dutch Guyana, 1796 to 1900, I plan to publish, and a history of the WPA between 1974 and 1985.
You obviously have assembled much of the material for the first publication you refer to, proposed publication.
Which one? The press?
Press.
Yes, yes, volumes.
What about the information for purposes of the second publication, the History of the Working People's Alliance?
Pardon, I didn't get the question.
The material for the second publication
Yeah.
that you propose.
Oh, well, I mean, apart from the WPA archives, the General Archives, Catholic Standard, and my own recollections, I have, I think, approximately three chapters finished. I have to complete 2 more, but because of circumstances, I couldn't finish. You know, academic life is very stressful at times, and I've had some medical issues, so I couldn't complete it, but it's in the works. And I think the fortuitous nature of this commission will give me a lot more sensible reasoning about that period than I ever could contemplate prior to those chapters that I developed. So this will be very helpful.
So you're saying that in terms of assembling material,
Yeah.
it's probably more than 50% completed.
Yeah, so approximately 60% completed, yeah.
Can you say, Dr. Westmaas, whether the information in your written statement and oral evidence was assembled specifically for purposes of this Commission of Inquiry?
Yes. The material that I have in this statement?
The information that you have,
Yeah.
Was it assembled specifically for this, or did this come from the material you were assembling for your book?
Yeah, I get the question. Yes, certainly. The material that I'm assembling, I pulled extracts from it to conceive of this statement. Yes, I did. The personal statements, the information, the timelines, and the clean reports and stuff like that are already in my manuscript.
So is it correct to say, Dr. Westmaas, that the material and oral evidence offered here is not specifically influenced by the terms of reference of this commission?
Yes, you're right. Yeah, correct.
And would you confirm that the attachments all precede the announcement of the terms of reference?
Oh, yes.
And I'm going to ask you your opinion as an academic and as a writer, whether in your professional opinion the information that you have presented meets the standards expected of a writer of historical events.
Well, as I say, self-praise is no recommendation, but I would suggest yes, to a great extent.
I now wish to ask you a few specific questions. You said in your witness statement that you attended free history classes offered by Walter Rodney. That's in the last sentence, paragraph 1 of your statement.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the content of those classes or the tuition?
Well, I was, I can't remember the exact person, but I learned of these classes because a handbill, as you saw in the attachment, was handed around. And being somebody who was thinking politically at that time, although now my thoughts have been formulated, couldn't say, I wanted to go. I mean, Dr. Rodney's free classes were a big pull. So somebody took me by car to Aubrey Barker, to South Rhineville, to attend those classes. At that time, I was working with an insurance company. I was the messenger boy. So
My question was about the contents of the course.
Oh yeah, I'm coming to that. Yeah, so when I arrived there, we were given a handout, and the contents was usually about Marxist and historical periodization. In other words, a combination of the classic texts of Marx, Engels, and other Marxist historians, and as well as Guyanese history. So he began with Guyanese historical processes which led to the development of the modern politics, but using a Marxist methodology. So what he did is to conflate the methodology with the analysis of Guyanese history, which is his forte. And so yes, in that context.
And would you say that the contents were essentially intellectual and academic?
Yes, but Walter Rodney had a way of conveying his academic potential and his ideas in a very fluid and accessible way. So even though it was conceived academically, it was received very easily by the participants, at least most of the participants.
In your statement, Dr. Westmaas, you said the context between 1978 and 81 was one of social and political upheaval. To what extent, so far as you can recall, was this upheaval influenced by economic factors?
Very much so. There are many factors, as you hinted there, but the economic factor was very principal in the civil rebellion. It was a period of some shortages in food production. There was an international economic dimension. After the 1973 change in the gold standard, the international economy went into a tailspin, and mainly third world countries have felt the effect of it, especially in the oil crisis. And that generated impacts at home. And so what happened was a combination of the external economic world system factor and the local economic factor, where decisions of a particular government can alter or reify your standard of living. And in that context, it was not doing too well for the ordinary people in terms of economic living.
I know you're a historian and not necessarily an economist, and you were very young then.
Yeah.
But could you say, Dr. Westmaas, how the economic conditions manifested themselves, supply of goods and services, level of wages and salaries, etc.?
Well, there was a minimum wage, but it could not, I can't remember the exact minimum wage, but obviously that was a period, and I had a discussion with somebody yesterday who was talking about rice flour and other inconveniences of that period when you couldn't access what we call historical, quote-unquote, food, the traditional Guyanese food, because of the bannings on certain, by economic means. So the architects of the economy had decided to restrict certain items in order for the economy to stabilize itself. But in so doing, it spiraled outwards and affected the ordinary people, man and woman in the street. And it affected them very badly in terms of their wages, means of living, housing, food, and other hindrances.
You have had access to the archives of the Working People's Alliance. Can you say whether the Working People's Alliance did any analysis of the economic situation in Guyana during the period covered by this Commission of Inquiry?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, Dr. Clive Thomas is the national economist, but also party economist, and he was part of the New World Group. And his analysis was very present in our publications and in the Clean. And so too was UC Guyana, who is also very, very skilled in economic analysis. And you had Dr. Maurice Odell as well in our ranks. And we generally...
Dr. Maurice Odell, you're mentioning these names, perhaps, if you could just give some indication.
Dr. Clive Thomas is an executive member of the WPA,
and a professional
economist, world-renowned and Caribbean-renowned economist. Dr. Maurice Odell is, I think, was a former economist in the Central Bank of Guyana, something like that. I don't know his current position, but he's also an economist, maybe of some different dimension to Dr. Clive Thomas. But yes, those two happen to reside in the ranks of the WPA, and they happen to give of their input economic analysis, but not exclusively. The working people on the streets also help with analysis, and Brother UC Guyana was very incisive in breaking down economic analysis for people in Clean and elsewhere.
Did you provide, I understand you provided the commission with considerable research material. Did you provide them with any material on the economic conditions prevailing at the time?
Yes, I think I supplied a document by Dr. Clive Thomas, written via the University of Guyana Staff Association at that time, University of Guyana Staff Association, which was a union, and he wrote an analysis of the economic conditions in 1980 via the union, and it was published by the WPA.
Dr. Westmaas, earlier this morning, you referred to a vehicle owned by, I think you said Dr. Rupnarayan, GZ 9244.
Yeah.
Is that the same vehicle that is numbered serial number 10 in the WPA recognition handbook?
I'll have to look at that. I can't be certain. Yeah.
Would you like to?
So, yes, Holden station wagon, GZ 9244, dark green, frequently driven by Walter Rodney. Well, it may not have been, I'm not sure if it's Dr. Rupnarayan's vehicle, but remember I was young at the time. I drove in the vehicle, he was driving it, so I assumed it was either Dr. Rupnarayan, Jocelyn Dow, or Omowali's vehicle, but it was driven by Dr. Rupnarayan.
You referred specifically in your witness statement to 3 incidents. You numbered them incident 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Can you recall whether these incidents were reported in the national media?
One of them was, well, two of them were. One of them more specific to the incident in Lagrange in the Catholic Standard, which was tendered. This other one in Camberville was reported by the state media and also reported by the Day Clean, but not specific to my role as such.
Were the state media in the habit of reporting on these incidents involving the Working People's Alliance and other political and social groups in
Yes,
Guyana?
they would report on it. Yes.
And what would be the nature of their reporting?
Well, it's hard to say. There's so many reports. The nature of the reporting would usually be configured in the context of the state's version of events. That's what I could suggest to you. But there may have been objective reporting on some of the incidents, but generally speaking, if you got a report about Camberville meeting, it would configure it that the WPA tried to hold an illegal meeting in Camberville, and hence they needed the police to break it up. But from our perspective, it would be that we were denied the possibility of holding a meeting in that particular zone.
In your chronology of events, you referred at times to 2 particular groups, CDD, and that was essentially made up of political parties?
No, not essentially, not only political parties. It was political parties, including individuals, the churches, Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, maybe the Muslim Anjuman, and a few other groups. It involved professionals who worked in the professional agencies, management, like the architects and business people, and things like that, yeah. organizations like that and individuals.
You refer to another group, and that is in April, page 19 of your statement. Compass, C-O-M-P-A-S-S,
Yes.
which you indicated was composed of trade union leaders, public sector managers, churchmen, and businessmen.
Yeah.
Could you name some of these persons? Can you recall?
Well, it was formed March 1st, 1979 approximately, and it included people like Pat Thompson from the Bauxite Company, perhaps Malcolm Taharali, a few other senior insurance executives, Albert Rodriguez, architect. I can't remember a few of the other people. Colin Chumley, Bishop Randolph George.
Colin Chumley would be this.
I don't know what his designation was at the time, but I knew he was somebody very influential in public life.
My final question to you, Dr. Westmaas. I notice you credit, am I assuming, the police with transportation of 25 activists, WPA activists, to Mocha. Was the police in the habit of facilitating transportation for WPA activists?
Of course. Yes. I can't give the specific times and dates, but it happened over time in various years.
And could you say the nature of that transportation? And why they would have been taken to Mocha? So I have two questions. The nature of the transportation and why they would have been taken to Mocha.
Well, it is one specific incident where I know Brother Sassi Omo, Ngozi Moses, who are WPA members, Mabutu Kamara, and a few others were taken up to Mocha and deposited there after, I think the protest was about UC Guyana's sentence for printing and publishing Day Clean. There was a protest outside the magistrate's court, and they were picked up and taken to Mocha, the back of Mocha, and left there. I presume Mocha because, one, it was rural, and two, it was purportedly a stronghold of the People's National Congress.
Is it correct to say as well that, is it the Mocha on the East Bank of Demerara, which is a remote village off the East Bank Highway?
Yes, yes.
Sorry, ma'am? What, it's...
I don't, my geography is very bad.
Would it be the public road? Providence is probably about 6 miles.
I'm not taking, I wouldn't want to go on a limb on that.
Madam Chair, Madam Commissioner, if I may, I think it was about 6 miles, and then it's the village itself, the Providence, the turn off into Mocha is about 6 miles from Georgetown, and Mocha itself was probably 5 miles down a fairly lonely road.
Yeah, very lonely road, yeah.
Was return transportation provided?
No. Activists had to walk back onto the main road and get to the city. I don't know the specifics of the incident. There were two of them. One was at Mocha and one was at Linden. Activists were taken to Linden and deposited in the, well, I don't like to use the word jungle, but deposited in the interior areas of Linden and were forced to walk. They had to walk, no recourse but to walk back to Georgetown.
Was that, in fact, a form of harassment by the authorities?
Most certainly.
And these arrests would have been carried out by security forces?
Yes, most likely.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I have no further question for this witness. Unless there can be
Mr. Ram.
further assistance,
Right.
I'll take my leave.
Mr. Chairman, I'm speaking from around the corner. On behalf of my learned friend, Mr. Brian Clark, I understand he had a pressing personal matter to address this afternoon and left a little bit early, but he also indicated that he had no questions for this witness and therefore is covered in that sense. Grateful.
Your brother with him?
Mr. Chairman, I'm very willing to go now and prepare.
Yes. We are willing to receive you.
Thank you. Could the witness be shown the assassination cry of a failed revolution, please? Particularly page 23. Dr. Westmaas, you told Commission Chairman and in your statement, in your witness statement, that with respect to Gregory Smith, which is at page 9 of your witness statement,
Yes.
that you, as the membership secretary of the party at one time and as de facto archivist,
Yeah.
I can categorically confirm, based on a perusal of our WPA records, that there was no Gregory Smith on the membership roll of the party at any point in time. You recall that?
Yes.
May I show you the book written and co-authored by the Smiths, and particularly where he claimed and what he claimed he put his name as relative to the membership. He
Yes.
says, do you see chapter 3?
Yes.
You see the second paragraph?
Yes.
Could you read the second paragraph beginning with Brother Yarden, please?
Yeah. Brother Yarden gave me a form to fill. The form was about 6 inches by 4 inches. I filled in my name, date of birth, address, and occupation. I gave the name William Smith and told them everyone knew me as Gregory. I then explained to them how I got the name Gregory.
Pause. In your statement, you said that your checks revealed no enrollment of Gregory Smith on the membership roll.
Yes.
What about William Smith? Because according to him in this document, he said he gave his name as William Smith. What about William Smith? Did you check for William Smith?
Yes. There's no William Smith on the record.
There is no William Smith as membership. So, relative to your knowledge, your investigation, and your records, this statement will be an untruth.
Yes.
Now, let us look at the same page 23, and I just want to go over one area but with a different angle. You stated that the names referred to by Gregory Smith, and can I take them all together and then I will ask you the question.
Yeah.
At page 23, he referred to one Brother Yarden.
Yes.
Could you go to page 43? He refers to one Brother Fowler.
Yes.
And then could you turn over said page? He refers to both Brother Morris. Those are the names that he referred to.
Yeah.
Morris,
Yeah.
Yarden, and Brother Winston at page 38, yes?
Yes.
Now, according to the archives, there are no persons who were at the time on the roll of the WPA with those names.
No. We had a name Morris, but
But that was Dr. Maurice
Ordle.
Ordle.
Yeah, so the spelling would be M-A-U-R-I-C. Yeah.
I am quite sensitive to the different accents.
Okay.
But Maurice and Morris are two different names altogether.
Altogether, yes.
Whether you are in Barbados, Bridgetown,
Or
Jamaica, Kingston, Maurice and Morris are two different names.
yes, and spelled differently too.
Good. So could you tell me,
Other than in pronunciation?
apart from the pronunciation, they're just different names?
Yeah.
And in fact, Maurice in Guyana is pronounced as Maurice, correct?
Yes.
And Morris is pronounced as Morris.
Morris, yeah.
So that distinction is taken care of and not lost in translation.
Correct.
Therefore, your official records does not have,
Neither.
do not have any of those names.
No.
But hold on, there's another phenomenon. You know, officially you can refer to persons one way,
Yeah.
but in the day-to-day operation,
Yeah.
they take on another name.
Yes.
At any time in the existence of the WPA between 1979 and 1980, were any members of the WPA referred to by any of those names?
No, not to my knowledge.
So that would also be another untruth, well, several untruths coming out of this book written by Gregory Smith and his sister, correct?
Yes.
Now, I notice
Sorry, how many names you put to him?
4, Yarden, Maurice, Fowler, Winston.
Thank you.
And those are, did you pick up any other names referred to in his book relative to assistance from the WPA or his involvement?
No, I checked through and I found those 4.
And therefore, as far as it relates to his recollection about involvement of those persons, it would be true to conclude that those are fictitious.
Yes.
From the records.
From the records, yes.
And from the reality of references.
Yes.
Now, something struck me and I was very saddened by it. I noticed that the interest that I represent, Donald Rodney, he didn't make the recognition handbook of the Working People's Alliance. His name is not there.
Yeah.
Also, and could you check for me, I could suggest it to you, at the time, you know, he drove motor vehicle number PBB2349.
Yeah.
Would it be true to say that even his vehicle did not make the starting lineup of of this document, the recognition handbook?
Yeah.
Sorry. May I can? So Donald Rodney, neither name nor picture is there, and his vehicle number is not there on this official line.
No.
So let's put Donald Rodney into context. It means then, and tell us, was he ever on, as your role as archivist and chronicler of the WPA, was he ever a registered member in 1980 in the WPA?
Not in 1980. He became a member, a very active member subsequently.
Subsequent to June 1980.
Yeah.
And when we speak of June, we speak of June 13, 1980.
Yes.
Up to that point, he was not an active member.
No, he was not.
And his name was not registered on the roll of the WPA.
No.
So, his involvement up to June 13, 1980 was really, he is the blood relative of the late Dr. Rodney.
Yes.
And on the night of June the 13th, 1980,
Is that the euphemism for a brother?
it's another way of putting it, he's the brother.
Yes.
And on the night of the 13th of June 1980, he's given his brother a drop.
Yeah.
He is below the radar of the state. They're not onto him because he's not involved in anything that will make him a subject of state inquiry. Isn't that so?
Yes. That's correct.
And in fact, your research after, both as an academic and a member of the WPA, and thereafter an executive member, was that really and truly the planners, whoever were the orchestrators of this dastardly event, they weren't expecting Donald to be there that night.
That is my understanding.
And quite frankly, he was lucky to escape with his life by running away
Yes.
to Ms. D'Souza, Karen D'Souza, running to her house.
And I, yes.
Yes. So let's go back now to Donald Rodney and his. It's a question which he answered. Which he answered. Wait, well, did you answer my question?
Yes, I did.
Oh. Okay, just making sure. Now, Donald Rodney, not ever being a member of the WPA that night, I want to take you to one of the terms of reference and one of the documents you presented to this commission. Caribbean Studies, volume 37, was that appendix 5 in a bundle? Chairman, Madam, Appendix 5 in a bundle. Now, this article, again, we put it in the context, was written by you, yes?
Yes.
Which article for the benefit of the public?
The article is titled Caribbean Studies, 1968 and the Social and Political Foundations and Impact of the New Politics in Guyana.
Yes.
In this article, could he be shown the article, please?
I have a copy.
You have it. Number 5.
Exhibit.
But he's provided, you know.
What's the exhibit?
Number 5, this statement.
NW1, Exhibit 5, attached
Exhibit
to the
5.
statement.
Now at page 118, and going over to page 119, you have a writer, and I'll get to the writer. Could you read which the statement made by a writer crystallizing Burnham's control over the state?
Yeah, it was written by George K. Dans, an academic at the University of Guyana.
Yes.
Statement reads,
Spell K, that.
D-A-N-N-S. George K. Dans, D-A-N-N-S. Sociologist.
Yes.
So,
Read it, please.
as leader of the ruling PNC party, Prime Minister Burnham has the power to appoint the deputy leader, party chairman, general secretary, and the editor of the party's newspapers. His total dominance over the ruling party is matched by his total dominance over key state institutions. Burnham is Prime Minister, Minister of Defense in charge of all security forces, Chairman of the Defense Board, Minister of Education, President of GuyStack, the governing body of the public corporations and public enterprises. He is also the President on leave of the Guyana Labor Union, the oldest union in the Caribbean. All in all, he is the most powerful individual ever in the history of Guyana and perhaps the entire Commonwealth Caribbean. End of quote.
This quotation was adopted by you and put as part of your article.
Yes.
Do you associate yourself with the veracity of this quotation? Is it a true quotation? Is it a true depiction of Forbes Burnham in 1979-1980?
Yes, it is.
But more importantly, I would like to turn you to something even more pointed. Page 128, the quotation itself, or the reference in your article made by George K. Dans. At number 47 is your bibliography
Yeah.
reference, yes?
Yes.
Tell this commission the New Nation the statement quoted in the New Nation on November 17, 1973, where the then Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Burnham, said something about the party and as it relates to God.
Yeah. Which page?
Page 128 of the same document, reading lines 5 from the bottom. Mr. Chairman, does the commission have it?
You get ahead there.
Go.
So, go ahead.
Yes, please.
So Dans also cites New Nation, November 17, 1973, organ of the ruling party at the time, as quoting Burnham thus,
Hold
quote,
on. Stay the quote.
okay, thus, God says before you were, I was. The party says to the government, before you were, we are. The government has got to be, in our system, a subordinate agency to the party, end of quote.
What did you understand? And I'm going in the terms of reference 2, 3, well, particularly terms of reference number what or how would you translate this statement made in 1970?
Which one? God says, before you were, I was?
Yes, the entire statement. And especially, the party says to the government, before you were, we were. The government has to be in our system a subordinate agency to the party.
Yes. Yeah, I would ascribe this to the notion of paramountcy of the party, which was spoken about in the commission prior to this, my presence here today, and generally reported on at that time by the opposition and other forces in Guyana. But it's a symbol of paramountcy, or statement of paramountcy.
That's the second statement. What the party to the government says. Before you were, I was. But what about the first one? God says, before you were, I was. What about that? That's paramount to you?
Well, I'm just ascribing to the collective statement. I'm not perusing it section by section. My reference was to the entire statement. But the statement, God says, before you were, I was, it's a statement of a metaphor, presumably for his power in the party at the time.
Would you say it's a metaphorical adoption and adaptation of the principle of God?
Yes, I would
being
suggest.
supreme?
Yes, being supreme, yes. I'm not a biblical scholar, but yes, I would assume that.
You wouldn't regard as blasphemous?
No, because I'm not not biblically oriented. I wouldn't know it. I wouldn't ascribe myself as a person who could state that is blasphemous. In other words,
you're
in theory, yes, it's
you're
blasphemous.
sociologically oriented.
Yes,
so
sociologically, yes.
What would you say, viewed from in those eyes?
Well, it's obviously a statement that ascribes godly powers to an individual on earth. So yes, in that sense.
I know, you come for me overnight, man.
Continue, sir.
Much obliged, Mr. Chairman. Now, you also place on record the article from the
Starbrook News.
On Sunday, the 24th of June, 2007, NW3. Which contains really a history of the decline.
Yes.
Now, we have heard from Brother UC Guyana, we have heard from Brother Ogunsi, we're now hearing from you.
Yeah.
This article, because we want to condense, we are trying here to condense a time and space in history.
Yeah.
Would you say that this article gives an accurate record and history of the events leading to the advent of the decline in Guyana?
Yes.
Tell us, the Chairman, does the Commission have NW3?
Yes, I think I've seen it this morning. A short history, that's the title.
Yes. Look at the column 3, lines 7, if you can read it. You don't have the article.
No.
Could you be provided with the article?
Moses Bagwan.
Bagwan. Yes.
Right.
So where is it at?
Column 3. So you're going Nigel Westmaas, that's column 1.
Yeah.
Born into turbulence, that's column 2. Immigration, that's column 3. Yes? I'm going across.
On the first page.
On the
On the
first
first
page.
page, okay.
You're on the first page, yes?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, go down from line 6 from the bottom. When the WP attempted to uplift, you see it?
Yes.
Could you read that for me, please, up to the end?
When the WPA attempted to uplift the equipment, the consignment of newspapers in order, an order suddenly appeared in the official gazette that essentially gave the minister new powers to prevent imports of, quote, any printed matter which in the opinion of the minister, is prejudicial to the defense of Guyana, public safety and public order, end of quote.
Are you telling this commission in context that the first batch, the 10,000 issues, were imported from the Tapia House
In Trinidad.
in and it's about to clear customs,
Yeah.
you get something from the official gazette, yes?
Yeah.
And then the involvement of the controller of customs.
Yeah.
And then there was a bonfire, I think in your statement you said it was Nazi style. Burning, you said that in your statement, I read.
Yeah.
Could you then tell this commission which arms of state would have been involved? Well, firstly, would you have seen this as a repression of freedom of the press?
Yes, widely so.
And especially the press who were in opposition to the ruling party?
Yes.
Which arms of the state would have been involved in this exercise?
Well, again, I wouldn't legally
Well, firstly,
speak.
the gazette, that wouldn't just come from any ordinary Joe.
Yeah, that would come from the representative of the state who designed laws and legal procedure.
Right. What about the controller?
The Comptroller of Customs would also fall under that heading because they are consigned to deal with the documents themselves.
What about the burning?
The burning, I presume the Comptroller of Customs at the time. I don't know if any other agencies were involved. I generally don't know.
And would you say that that was the prevailing atmosphere as it relates to the press and opposition to the powers that be at the time?
But it was developing. It was not, it got worse later, but that was the origins of the beginning of the repression against day clean. So in that particular time, there was a certain semblance of freedom of the press, but that was an act which began to develop into,
And of course, you did use the thriving free press in Trinidad to try to assist you.
Yes, I did.
Now, I want to move on to another aspect. And to clear or to clarify a certain issue. On the night of the demise of Dr. Rodney, was there a pamphlet titled Hickory Dickory Dock? I've heard about it, I've never seen it. Firstly, could you confirm that you actually saw the existence of that?
I saw the existence of a reproduction of the Hickory Dickory Dock, yes.
Has anyone, Mr. Chair, has anyone ever produced that document to this commission?
To see it if you have it.
Dr. Westmaas,
Yes.
may I impose on you, well, firstly, do you have in your possession a copy of that document?
Yes, I do.
Would you be so kind?
You have it in your
to
pocket now, sir?
It's on this thing called the jump drive.
Could you jumpstart it and have a copy for this commission
Yes,
first
I can.
thing in the morning?
Yes, but on what basis? Who's the author of the document? What are we doing? I keep asking this question all the time.
Mr. Chairman, this document has been referred to on several occasions.
I never heard of it.
I will,
But it has been referred to at least once previously.
Yes.
On several occasions.
more importantly, Mr. Chairman, it affects, because remember, my client was charged with having in possession explosives. This document may very well be relative to his, it's very important to me.
You're trying to defend him here on that charge? This is
I-
not the
I-
forum
I-
to
I-
defend him, you know?
I intend to use your terms of reference as far as is allowed in law to put certain things on record. So Chairman, may I ask that this witness through you produce that document for us tomorrow, please?
Mr. Chairman, I object, and I want to make this point now. This commission cannot be used as a place where every piece of paper, scrap paper that is picked up or heard about becomes evidence. Lawyers must lay the evidentiary basis for the admission of a document. And I could, if you wish me to read the terms of the commission and the terms of reference, it speaks clearly to following the rules of our constitution and laws of evidence, etc. So I don't know where we're adopting this laissez-faire attitude about the tendering and admissibility of documents and evidence in this commission of inquiry.
Well,
There's no attempt being made to lay any foundation.
yeah, but Mr. Williams, the hour for the production of the document has not yet come. He He is talking
As a
about what
police
he
officer.
proposed to
As a
introduce tomorrow.
I'm guided.
Well, tomorrow we'll deal with that, not today.
So you don't put off for tomorrow, what could be done today?
Mr. Chairman, I agree, and I would like to answer.
No, there's no need to answer that now. When you come tomorrow, we'll hear the argument and we'll rule. But we won't determine that today.
But, Mr. Chairman, I don't have the power of asking the witness to produce the document. The chair has that power.
Well, you've asked him and we'll see
Could you produce that document for us tomorrow, please, sir?
Yes, we can.
Yes, you can.
That has nothing to do with admissibility. You're asking him that. We'll deal with that tomorrow.
Mr. Scotland is attempting to manage this commission, sir. Notwithstanding what you have said, he's talking to the witness.
I know that he's not alone in that respect.
Mr. Chairman, you have lumped me in an exercise to which I claim complete innocence. I am attempting to get in a document that may be of assistance. Now tell me, you said that Donald Rodney became a member of the WPA after the events of June 1980.
Yes.
And it would be true to say that it's only then that he became actively involved in the activities of the WPA.
Yes.
I have noticed, Dr. Westmaas, that several persons who I would consider luminaries, who are sons of Guyana, post-1980, now must make their living abroad. UC Guyana comes to mind, you come to mind, several others. Do you think that the events of June 13, 1980 has had any fuel for such an exodus, a brain drain that I would call it?
A qualified no, because my exodus and that of Brother UC Guyana and others occurred much later. I left Guyana in 1999, very reluctantly to come back, but events take over. Brother UC Guyana similarly left 2003 or 5, I can't remember. But it was not implicit, the lineage of Guyanese history may be a factor, the economic situation.
It may be a
but
factor.
directly speaking, no, I wouldn't suggest that.
To be fair to Mr. Yusuf Guyana, he was very specific. He gave this commission evidence as to why he left, and it related to a particular situation that developed in his village, if I recall. He didn't relate it to the events of June 13, 1980.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner.
If I may say so.
Now, Mr. Chairman, subject to the production of that document, those would be my questions for this witness.
I saw you looking up. I thought you wanted to apply for an adjournment or maybe for...
No, just the production of that document, and I can wrap up thereafter.
You wanted
Shortly
to
thereafter.
full man on the grounds that the light was fading. Right, well, who's next, Mr. Williams?
Mr. Williams is here.
As Mr. Scotland says, he wants a bat after me. What is he saying?
Mr. Chairman, subject to the production of the
He
document.
said he's finished except in relation to what we made.
Okay, sir, I don't know how long we're going. I could start by asking a couple of questions, if you wish. But it's 10 to 2.
You fear that if you go to the crease now, you may get out before 2?
Sir, but I was overnight watchman
On several
for
occasions.
nearly an hour on a previous occasion, and as you said, sir, I didn't lose my wicket.
I noticed that you only play one ball in every 6. All right, we'll try your hand now and see what technique you will
Yeah,
apply.
he like Padams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Dr. Westmaas.
Yes.
Generally speaking, you have given personal evidence in relation to those occurrences at LaGrange, Campbellville, etc. Except for that, the rest of your testimony, really, I don't want to say it's anecdotal, but this basically a kind of historical account.
Yeah.
But you cannot appropriate or reprobate in relation to a lot of those occurrences that you spoke about. You can vouch for them personally.
I could, in the public record, they're in the public record. So my presentation of the public record is implicit in...
Right, but it's not your personal experience.
Not directly, no, not all of them.
Yes. Now, there's some, I don't want to detain you too long, but there are some things I need to deal with that have been reoccurring. You were just asked about this question of paramountcy. I think we have this extract from the Declaration of Sophia. I have an original copy. And I would like to refer the Commission, and if Mr. Westmaas could have a copy too of that exhibit. It would have been something like that. Yes. It's 14th December 1974. I refer you to chapter 2, page 11.
I don't have it in the form that you have it, so if you can guide me through, I have it in the...
You have any anything beginning from page 1 to 11 or anything like that?
No, the pages are blank numbers, but if you give me the chapter, I could find it.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2.
Mr. Williams, is yours the address to the Congress?
This is an
Oh, I
original
see.
copy.
Okay.
Yeah, I have chapter 2 here, the role of the party.
Exactly.
Okay.
Probably at some time you could make that original available so that the Secretariat could copy it.
I suppose so, but they have a copy, they have copies, Mr. Westmaas.
Yes, but it's just not as properly annotated as yours seem to be.
And I think the cover is also very important. It has Mr. Barnum's face very prominently displayed in the cover, which may be evidentially significant.
Is, Madam Commissioner, Dr. Westmaas.
Yes.
Might I respectfully refer you to the second paragraph on page 11?
For the record, apparently it's being said that it's EK5 and not 3, just for the record.
Well, Mr. Scotland, you didn't mean to mislead. Yes. Now, could you read paragraph 2?
As again, I have it in a different format, so if you give me the guidelines of...
Could you just allow me to read this?
Yes. Beginning, it was agreed?
Yes, the second paragraph.
Yeah. It was agreed after lengthy discussion that the emphasis should be on mobilizing the nation in every sphere and not merely for periodic elections, and in support of specific action and programs. It was also decided that the party should assume unapologetically its paramountcy over the government, which is merely one of its executive arms.
Thank you. Dr. Westmaas, a thread that has been running through the evidence of your colleagues in this Commission of Inquiry is that meant that the PNC had control over the state. Is that your understanding of the trust of the evidence so far in this inquiry?
Yes, to a great extent, yes.
Now, having read that it's over the paramountcy over the government, which is merely one of its executive arms, do you agree with me that this is referring to only one arm of the state? The government specifically is mentioned. You seen it there in your...
Yeah, specifically, yes. Yeah. Specifically as referring to that in this statement, yeah.
It's government. Now, do you agree with me that a state has 3 arms? Certainly, those organized along the Westminster model line. You have 3 arms. You have the government, you have the judiciary, and the legislature. You agree with that?
Generally, yes.
But the government is executive. Mr. Chairman,
I
I
think a
don't
false
know.
premise is being put to the witness I think the government comprises much more than the executive.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, counsel for the commission can enlighten us about what he's saying. I have said that the state has 3 arms, once using our Westminster model constitution, and those arms are the government, or executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. Is he contesting that?
Yes, the executive and the government are 2 different concepts. The government is much more than the executive.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's the first time I'm hearing that. It's the first time I'm hearing that.
Mr. Williams, I don't pretend to know more constitutional law than you do, but I'm a student of the Constitution. As I understand it, no one has ever propounded that the 3 arms of the state comprises of the government. I've always known it to be the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we are at cross purposes. Executive and government, they are used interchangeably in describing that arm of the state.
The government includes the opposition.
But since that intervention, could I proceed? My learned friend could deal with that when he is re-examining. But I reiterate that under our constitutional model of governance, the 3 arms of the state are the government/executive, the judiciary.
Getting on with the question, you know?
Yes, sir.
The witness understands
Now,
this. You can answer.
therefore, that statement in the Declaration of Sophia does not refer to the judiciary. Do you agree with that?
It doesn't state it, yes, it doesn't state it refers to the judiciary.
Also, do you agree it does not refer to the legislature?
As stated here, no.
No.
Has he answered?
Yes, sir. It doesn't refer to the legislature either. Now, this statement, isn't this statement consistent with the Marxist theory, certainly the theory that was in Europe about the party being in control of the government or executive?
Yes, generally speaking, but there's no one stream of Marxist theory. There's a development, a theory which I already mentioned, which comes out in the New World Movement, which eschews the paramountcy or power of the state over every part of society.
No, but we're not talking about every part of society. That statement clearly states the government. It doesn't mention the judiciary, it doesn't mention the legislature. It's a clear statement. So, this statement, being consistent with Marxist dogma, maybe not of the stream that you mentioned just now, but it is a stream. You agree with that?
Yes.
Now, this would not have been unusual for a government professing to be a Marxist government or a socialist government.
No, not unusual for that. But
in addition to that,
You deal with paramountcy now because I see.
it's paramount same dealing with.
But does that not refer to the party rather than the government? The party controlling.
But that's what we're talking about, party control of the government, not the party control of the judiciary or the legislature. This is telling you clearly that the party is what creates the government in the first place. We have elections, they're contested by political parties. But let me pose questions to you. Do you agree in our system, political parties contest elections?
yes,
And the successor, they form the government.
yes.
And isn't in that context, this statement is made. In fact, the statement referred to by my learned friend when he referred it to you just now, about God. Remember that?
Yeah.
All he's saying there is that the party exists before the government. and it's the party which creates the government. Isn't that correct?
Yes, but you're asking me for if it's correct in the so far as it relates to state control over government.
Not state control. Party paramountcy.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
So to me, it's a clear statement. I don't know where all the difficulties arose.
But the difficulty...
No, but just
Okay.
continue. Let's continue.
If you invite an answer, surely the witness
No,
must
the
answer.
witness has answered me already. He's now volunteering.
So you want to cut him off at that point?
No, I don't. I don't wish to
I'm
cut you
more
off
concerned.
either. Yes, Mr. Chair. No.
I'm saying I was more
The learned Queen's Counsel apparently is trying to throw me off track. Something pretty difficult.
You are not known to be easily thrown off balance.
Exactly, sir.
Chair, I think that my friend is in full flow now, much like Chanda Paul was earlier today before he lost his wicket.
What is this
But it
there?
now being 2:05, I think it's an appropriate time for us to take the afternoon break.
But before we do that,
We might just be able to get the written-
the last question in for
Another
you. Let's
political
finish
speech perhaps before we
Let's
complete.
finish with him, sir. Yes. And therefore, are you aware, as a historian, certainly, that the government attracted critical support from the main and official opposition of the day?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
for the PPP?
This is
Yes.
the PPP.
You ever got to know the basis of that?
Mr. Chair?
I've read that, but did we ever get to know the basis of the support?
Yes.
What motivated it,
No, I say you want to know if you will get to know the basis?
if you could?
There was a basis here because they were all professing various approaches to Marxism, socialism. I think the PPP were Marxist Leninists, and I always felt that the PNC was a softer approach to that, and wanted them to
You
be
sure
more.
that the Stalinist wasn't referred to? Stalinist is regarded as harshly, no, not softer. Anyhow, you get
You
it.
couldn't describe the PNC at that time in any manner as Stalinist. Yes, so basically this is the situation what we have here. Mr. Bonner made a statement at the Congress, it's here. He spoke about what is a common socialist practice of the party taking paramountcy of the government that it created. It doesn't speak to any other arm of the state. And so there was no complete control of the state, I'm putting that to you. That there was no complete control of the arms of the state, which include the judiciary and the legislature, by the People's National Congress during that period.
I would beg to differ in some respects because there was manipulation of both the legislature and the judiciary insofar as the clean and other cases were concerned in that period.
Insofar as
Cases with the clean newspaper and arms and ammunition charges and other events at that time.
that showed what? Paramountcy over what?
I'm not saying it's paramount. I said you were asking me if it shows that the paramountcy controls the legislature. I'm suggesting to you, you asked me in a different way. I'm suggesting to you that I don't agree fully that there was control insofar as the clean and other repressive acts at that time on the opposition.
But that
More
might be
principally the
governmental acts.
WPA.
You agree that would have been in the realm of governmental acts, if they occurred.
Yes, in the main.
But
yeah.
that's the point I'm making to you. But this sweeping statement that there was party control over the state was not true. Because there was no control over the judiciary nor the legislature. That statement expressed the socialist approach that the party that created the government should be paramount to the government, or certainly controlling the levers of the government. And that happens in every country in CARICOM today.
But you mentioned that the PPP and the PNC had a pact.
No, I'm saying the PPP gave
Gives critical support, yeah. But in that particular period of time, the WP opposed that formation. We were opposed in terms of democratic democratic principles. So in other words, we're coming from a different Marxist trajectory.
Okay. Chairman, it's a good point for us to break.
But remember before we go that the evidence last week from one witness was that half of the judicial officers appear to be responding to the paramount doctrine.
So, but that can't be proved. That's opinion.
Well, but that's
We
why
said-
we get here judgments.
Yeah, but Mr. Chairman, the first thing we've gotten over is the fact that this sweeping statement that paramount cement the control of the PNC of the state is subdivided into 3 arms. And the only arm it spoke about is the government. The arm of
I'm
government.
telling you that a witness says that in his judgment, half of the judicial officers were affected by the paramount.
So which witness is that?
I don't remember now, but I can tell you.
Mr. Ogun said he was not
I can
here.
tell you
But he
that-
hasn't been cross-examined. That's the problem we have all the time.
But I'm talking about the evidence thus far on record.
Sorry, that the evidence in chief.
When you are finished with him, we might have an amended view or a confirmed view. But I'm telling you what is on the record today.
Dr. Richard Cheltenham, you were not only a lawyer of substance in this region, but a minister. And I'm sure you're aware that Barbados has the Westminster-style model of constitution, which speaks about the 3 arms of the state. I'm sure of that. So I know you don't want to throw your hat into the ring as yet.
No,
but-
am I saying anything different from what you are saying, except
Thank you,
there
Mr.
was a
Chairman.
witness who interpreted paramountcy as going as far as impacting the judiciary. Anyhow, we can pursue that.
I'd like to offer Mr. Williams some critical support in terms of his application for an adjournment, sir.
Only in that respect, I know.
Only in that respect.
Sir, the learned Queen's Counsel is very chirpy this afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, as just housekeeping, it looks like we may be finished with this witness earlier tomorrow. So could we have Mr. Ogunse here on standby, please? So we can get
Yeah,
on
but
High Commission's
Mr.
work.
Williams, you were likely to be long with the witness.
I think my learned friend wants to find out how long I'm going to be. All I could say to you and the Commissioner, sir, is that I would take my time with Dr. Westmaas, who I consider to be an important witness.
Very well. But Mr. Garcia needs to be here in any event.
Yes.
Yes, I'm happy to see you, sir. Very well.
Before we take the break, I hope I'm not interrupting, please, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering whether my friend, Mr. Williams, would consider donating the Sapphire Declaration in its original form. Perhaps there are other copies that he has access to. But if he cannot donate it, we certainly would like to make a photocopy of it with the cover and everything. We can do that in about 15 minutes.
I will respond to that in the morning. I will not chance giving this to Mr. Hanman over the break at the end of the day's proceeding.
I know you often have to consult overnight. I hope that's not a matter that calls for consultation.
Perhaps I should look to see if there are any indentations in the book.
Chairman, any possibility he can bring copies of the flyers too? Hickory Dickory Dock?
Like Bora and Nancy stories.
When they come tomorrow,
A Nancy story.
Until tomorrow at